All right, so today we're going to cover section 4B. Today we're going to learn how to solve quadratic equations using completing the square. On the test on Thursday, you will have to demonstrate this technique. Now on the next page, it has all the steps that you need to follow. So as we just saw in that silly little video, the first step, which wasn't in the video because they just did a quadratic equation where the number in front of x squared was a 1. But what you need to make sure is that this a value that's in front of x squared, it needs to equal a 1. If it's not, we have to divide all the terms by that to make sure that it becomes 1x squared. Now, after we do that, we need to move the constant to the other side. Then we're going to take the b term, divide it by 2, and square it. Then that's what we'll be adding to both sides to keep the equation balanced. Then the left side becomes a perfect square trinomial that we can factor, and then we use the square root method. So let's go ahead and do some examples. So the first one, always your first step is to make sure that the number in front of x squared is a 1, and it is. So now step number 2, move the constant to the other side. So when I move the constant, after I add the 14 to the right side, I'm leaving a blank space here. And then I'm going to move the 14 to the other side. And then there's another blank space here. So now, next step is to take the b term, the negative 4. You divide it by 2, and you square it. So negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. And then negative 2 squared is 4. Now, what would go in both of these spots is that b term divided by 2 squared. Everybody with me so far? Instead of putting plus 4 on this left side, what I'm going to fill in here is what it was before I squared it. So in here, I'm going to put in plus negative 2 squared. Because then when I go to factor this trinomial, all I do is take what this was and put it down here squared. And now that trinomial is factored. Now I do have to do the addition on the right side, and now I use the square root method. So, all right, so.
You didn't have to do that though.
You didn't have to, you could put plus 4 there.
And then what happened? What's the trick?
So, the trick is this, okay? B term divided by 2 squared, so b term divided by 2 is negative 2. And then I can square it and it turns 4. So instead of writing a 4 here, I'm going to take what it was before I squared it. Because then this number that's right here raised to the second power, I just write right here. That is this trinomial. If you think of it, it's x squared minus 4 plus 4. And then when you factor it, it's a binomial squared.
So that works for,
It works for everything.
for all the ones, everything.
Everything.
Yeah, we don't have to do the test, right?
You can put in the plus
No,
4.
we don't have to do that, like that trick.
Alright, so if we do the plus 4.
All right, so watch. All right, so let's do it this way.
Can you do it with the plus 4 too? This whole
Okay, so let's say I put in, and I didn't do the trick, and instead here I put plus 4. Now you have to figure out how to factor that trinomial. Factors of 4 that give you negative 4, and that's going to be negative 2 and negative 2. So it's a lot easier if you do the trick. Just take this. This goes on the left side. This goes on the right side.
Oh. But you can do it either way.
Yes.
That's just a trick. Alright, but
Because you're squaring it and you're making it positive 4. You with me?
alright.
All right. So now I use the square root method. The x minus 2 comes out. And then I get plus minus square root 18. I have to leave this in simplest radical form before I move the 2 over. So I do a factor tree for the 18. 9 times 2. You can go all the way to prime, but I recognize 9's a perfect square. So it's just going to be plus or minus 3 square root 2. Everybody with me so far?
No.
Now I have to add the 2. And I don't know why my pencil doesn't work in that area. So then I get x equals 2 plus or minus 3 square root 2 once I add the 2. All right, now, on WebAssign, you have to pull it apart. On the test, you can leave it like that. So on WebAssign, you're going to have to do 2 minus 3 square root 2, and then 2 plus 3 square root 2, and it's going to tell you to separate it with a comma.
Are we gonna look at a quiz?
Not today, because it's going to take the whole class to do this, because I got 6 people that need to make it up, and most of them are coming tomorrow morning. Okay? Probably after tomorrow morning, they're going to get a totally different quiz, so it will be in their best interest to show up tomorrow. All right, next one. Number 2. All right, so again, the number in front of x squared is a 1, so I can,
How do you know when to do it?
what do you mean?
Like to do this?
To do completing the square? Anytime you have a quadratic equation with an x squared, as if the highest power in your equation is x to the second or any variable to the second, you can use this method. Okay? Now on the test, it's going to tell you, use completing the square. Okay, so we're going to add the 1. We need to get the constant to the other side. Leave the blank space. Take the b term, divide it by 2, and square it. I get 3 squared, which is 9. So I'm going to be adding 9 to both sides. But what I like to put in here is I'm going to put in a plus 3 squared. And then over here I'll put the 9, because I got to do the math on the right side. So now I factor this trinomial. This turns into x plus 3 squared equals 10.
How do you do it?
Use the square root method. X plus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 10. Move the 3, because 10 can't be broken down. X equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 10. Remember, for WebAssign, you're going to pull it apart. Good? All right, next one. Same thing. Move the constant to the other side. So I'm going to add 5. X squared plus 2x, leave a blank space. And then take the b term, divide it by 2. Square it. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 squared is just 1. So I'm adding 1. And then over here I'm adding, if you want to think of it as 1 squared, you can, or just put the plus 1. So now I'm going to factor that trinomial. X plus 1 squared equals 6. Square root both sides. The x plus 1 comes out. Plus or minus the square root of 6. If I try to do a factor tree of 6, it's just 2 times 3, no perfect squares to pull out, and move the 1. X equals negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 6. And again, for WebAssign, you're going to pull it apart.
The only thing I'm kind of confused about when we're doing x2 plus 2x plus 1 squared, is it will it come out to the x plus whatever
That was when you divided by 2? Yep.
I don't know how to explain it, but
Uh-huh.
say it, I don't know if there's another equation, but 3 squared, when it has, on the other one, when it says 3 squared,
Uh-huh.
and it's x plus 3, then squared,
Mm-hmm.
is it that every time?
It'll be whatever that number is divided by 2. Does that make sense?
I don't know why you're laughing, I was just trying to explain.
Yes.
What happens if the b term is not divisible by 2?
We're going to leave it a fraction, and that's coming up.
Bro.
Okay? Yes, Ari.
Dude, I cannot do that.
Say that again. Why did I add 1 to 5? Because I need to keep my equation balanced. So because I added 1 here, I also have to add 1 here. Whatever I do to the left side, I have to do the right side. Does that make sense? All right, but good so far.
Well, because you put the 1 squared, it's x plus 1 squared.
All right, if you'd rather see it as x plus 1, just a plus 1, you can. If that's confusing you.
No, but then,
No, serious. Yes.
wait, but if you do leave it as 1, then wouldn't it just be x plus 1 equals square root of 6?
1 squared is 1, it doesn't matter.
Right. Because 1 times 1 is 1, and then 1 plus 1 is 2.
Exactly, that's it.
Yeah, no, I'm asking like every single time, like with whatever number is.
Whatever the number is.
It'll always be like.
Yep.
No.
All right, yes.
Why do we have to learn?
Why do you have to learn this? Because we're gonna use this later on when we go to do more stuff with quadratics. It all builds.
See, this is a quadratic formula, you have to learn like the.
What is next
Yeah.
period?
We're gonna need this to get it into vertex form. Yes.
Okay.
There's a reason. All right, everybody good? All right, let's keep going. Number 4, same thing. Now we have a fraction, but we're not gonna make it a decimal. After we divide the b term by 2.
Wait, can we do 3.5?
No, we're leaving it a fraction. All right, minus 12, get the constant on the other side. Leave the blank space. Take the b term, divide it by 2. So it becomes 7 over 2, and then we're gonna square it, and it's 49 over 4. So now, that's what I'm adding over here. And again, if you want to put plus 49 over 4 here, you can, but now you got to factor that. So it's a lot easier if you do my trick and you put it in here as the 7 over 2 squared, because that's what your trinomial is going to factor into, x plus 7 over 2 squared. Now, yes,
You can't put 7 over 2 on the right side.
you have to square it.
So,
You have to do the math now. I got to find a common denominator. I got to simplify that right side.
so if you can simplify the fractions, you only simplify it for the left side, not for the right side.
It's not simplified. It's still equivalent. These two things mean the same thing. 7 over 2 squared,
But it's like,
it's not reduced. It's not. I can't reduce 49 over 4.
not 7 over 2.
No.
Bro, you can't reduce it, dog.
Okay. All right, ready? All right. I need to find a common denominator for, no, 4. What? 3. 4.
No, for 12.
Okay.
48 over 4.
Thank you. Negative 48 over 4 plus 49 over 4 gives me 1/4. All right, everybody good so far? I have to square root both sides. Yep. Square root. This comes out. Oops. And I can square root the 1 and the 4 individually if that's easier for you. Square root of 1 is 1. Square root of 4 is 2.
So plus or minus 1 over 2.
Okay? Now, what was that? She's in the wrong class. All right. I think she's in the wrong class. Okay. All right. They'll figure it out. Okay. Now, because the radical, guys, because the square root symbol disappeared, I actually have to figure out the two answers here. So I can minus the 7 over 2 from both sides, and I get x is equal to negative 7 over 2 plus or minus 1/2. Now, no, I can't leave it like this. So when the square root goes away, you actually have to do negative 7 over 2 minus 1/2, and then negative 7 over 2 plus 1/2. This one is going to give me negative 8 over 2, which gives me negative 4. This one gives me negative 6 over 2, which gives me negative 3. So the two answers here are x equals negative 4 and x equals negative 3.
Wait, can you like hold it different?
Negative 7 minus 1 is negative 8, right?
Yes. I got 4 problems on here and I almost take up the whole thing already.
Negative 8/6.
Because -7 minus 1 is -8.
So
my
x
God,
equals,
I was plus or minus 8/7.
so x equals -4, comma 3.
-3.
Oh, yeah.
Negative 4. This is low-key gay.
All right, everybody good?
Yes.
All right, on to 5. Last of the easy ones. Okay,
Yo.
we need to move the constant to the other side because we still have a 1 here in front of x squared. So we don't have to divide anything yet. So x squared minus 3x, leave a blank space. Move the 6 over, and then I got to figure out what I'm adding to both sides. I take the b term, divide it by 2. So 3 divided by 2, -3 divided by 2, square it, and then I get 9/4. Positive when you square it. So that's what gets added here. And then here I can put in -3/2, so I don't need to think about what I'm factoring that trinomial into. And then it's x minus 3/2 squared equals, again, common denominator, it's going to be 4. So the whole number 6 becomes, yes, question?
Corey, why is it -3/2? Why isn't it be positive 3/2?
Because I'm taking the b term, which is -3, and dividing it by 2. So before I square it, it's negative. But when I square it, it becomes positive.
Oh, so we don't have. So the shortcut is don't square it. Just divide it by 2.
Yes.
Oh my god. Alright.
Okay, so now common denominator of the whole number 6 plus 9/4 is going to be 4. So it's 24/4 plus 9/4, which now gives me 33/4.
33/4.
Square root method. X minus 3/2 comes out, plus or minus, and again, you could square root the 33, square root the 4.
33/2.
Yes. And then move the 3/2 over to isolate x. Now, you can leave it like that, or since it already has a common denominator, you can go ahead and put it as 33/2 like that. Now, WebAssign is going to make you pull it apart. Now, also be able to recognize that they might also factor out a 1/2, and they might write the answer as 1/2, 3 plus the square root of 33 plus or minus. You might see something like this as an answer choice on a standardized test, like a PSAT or an SAT.
No, it's the same thing.
Because if you distribute this,
Half is the same thing as divided by 2.
correct. Everybody good on that? So any of these on the test, this one, or this one would be acceptable. Remember, WebAssign wants you to pull apart the plus minus. All right.
So which one is WebAssign?
WebAssign will take, WebAssign's going to want you to enter it like 3 minus the square 33/2, and then 3 plus the square root of 33/2. Or you could take the 1/2 one. The 1/2, 3 minus the square root of 33, and then 1/2, 3 plus. Any of these WebAssign will take. And you separate them with a comma. All right, here we go. Now it changes up a little bit. So for number 6, notice the number in front of x squared is not a 1. I need to divide all of the terms by 9. Everything.
Everything? I thought it was just both sides.
No, it's not a GCF.
To pull a 9.
Because 1 can't be divided by 9.
I squared it. I know.
All right, I got a bunch of fractions now.
4/3x
Yeah, it's just a cake, bro.
minus 1/9.
Bro.
Oh, no, it's not.
Now, it's the same steps that we've been doing now, except for we just have fractions as our B and C term. So we're gonna move the constant. So I'm gonna add 1/9 to make, in the end, yes, simplify it, make it easier. Otherwise, your numbers are gonna get really large. Leave the blank space, the 1/9, and then another blank space. Now, we take the B term, we're dividing it by 2 and squaring it. Remember, divide by 2 is the same thing as multiply by a half. So I'm going to take -4/3, divide it by 2, which is times by a half. I could simplify diagonally here and make this -2/3.
Negative 2/3.
And then I got to square it. So -2/3 squared, 4/9. All right, so now over here, I put 4/9. In here, I'm going to do my trick and put the -2/3 squared.
Okay. Plus more negative. Minus 2/3.
So x minus 2/3 squared equals 1/9 plus 4/9 is 5/9.
5 more 9.
Square root x minus 2/3 equals plus or minus the square root of 5/3. Add 2/3. X is equal to 2/3 plus or minus the square root of 5/3. Because it already has a common denominator, if you want to write it as 2 plus or minus the square root of 5/3, you can do it that way for the test. But again, WebAssign wants you to pull out and enter one answer with the subtraction and one with the addition. Then you'd either leave it apart or you'd find a common denominator. Why not?
Like I'm saying, we could.
You can. All right, next one. Everybody good? All right. We need to get rid of the 3 and then move the constant. Divide everything by 3. Move the constant to the other side so we can leave the blank space to make it a perfect square trinomial. Take the B term, divide it by 2, and square it.
So 2/3. Oh, no.
2/3 divided or times 1/2.
1/3. 1/3.
And then square it. Yep. Okay? So put in 1/9 here. And again, I'm going to put in here plus 1/3 squared.
1/3.
So x plus 1/3 squared. I need to find a common denominator between the 5/3 plus 1/9. So this is going to turn into the 5/3 is going to change into 15/9. When I add the numerators, I get 16/9. And now I can use the square root. Square root, it's a perfect square. Plus or minus
X.
4/3. Move the 1/3.
-1/3 plus or minus 4/3.
And then you got to simplify it because the radical disappeared. So x equals -1/3, like he said, plus or minus 4/3. but we got to do the two problems. You'll first do it as x equals 1/3 minus 4/3, and then plus 4/3. So the first one gives you negative 5/3. Yes. When the radical goes away, you have to solve it.
So x
And-
equals 1?
Yep. So x equals negative 5/3 and positive 1. Now, if you listen, yes.
Isn't it -1?
No, because the 4 is positive. You subtract and keep the sign of the bigger. So negative 1 plus 4 is positive 3. You follow? Okay, so if you were listening in the song, they were talking about finding intercepts, finding the roots. So what really, when you're going to move on later on and we start talking specifically about graphing quadratics and finding the different parts, sometimes the questions will be given to you like this and they're going to say, solve it. Or they might say, find the roots, find the zeros, find the x-intercepts. You're doing the same process for all of those instructions. You're finding what x equals. All right, next one. 3 more examples, just still more of the same. And then I'm going to do one with an imaginary solution. No. All right. Again, we need to get rid of that 3. So we have to divide everything by 3. X squared minus 4/3 x minus 1/3 equals 0. Move the constant. Leave the blank space. And now take the b term, divide it by 2 and square it. So negative 4/3 times 1/2. Simplify. Negative 2/3 squared 4/9. This is what I'm adding to both sides. Let me fix that. And then here I put it in as the plus negative 2/3 squared, because when I go to factor it, I've already got the binomial squared. Now I need to find a common denominator. So I'm going to change the 1/3 into 3/9. Add it to the 4/9. 7/9. Square root both sides. X minus 2/3 equals plus or minus the square root of 7 over 3.
Wait, isn't it x squared? Actually, never mind.
Add the 2/3. X is equal to 2/3 plus or minus the square root of 7 over 3. If you want to go ahead and just write it with 1 3 in the denominator, 2 plus or minus the square root of 7 over 3.
So when there's a radical in the numerator, you don't have to like actually check.
Correct. You don't have to actually do the problem.
Yeah.
Leave it with plus minus. But if there's no radical, that's when you got to do it. All right. Number 9. Get rid of the 5. X squared minus 7 over 5x minus 1/5. Move the constant to the other side.
You can divide -7 by 5 by 2.
We're going to multiply it by a half. Okay, so take the b term, negative 7 over 5, times it by a half, which is the same thing as dividing by 2. This is going to be really big. It's going to give you 7 over 10.
49 over 100.
Yeah.
But that simplifies.
No.
Plus 49. So minus, wait, no, it's plus 7 over 9.
Yes, bro.
Oh, because the middle is minus.
Whatever the sign is in the middle, that's what's going to be the sign in the binomial.
Alright.
So minus 7 over 10 squared Now we have to find a common denominator between 5 and 100. And it's going to be 100. So this 1/5 is going to turn into 20 over 100. I add that to the 49 over 100. And then I get 69 over 100. Then I need to square root both sides. X minus 7/10 equals plus or minus the square root of 69 over 10. Move the 7/10 over. And x equals 7 over 10 plus or minus the square root of 69 over 10. Again, it already has a common denominator. If you want to write it once, you can. And the last one.
Is this the I?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
There's none in the notes that have an I. I'm going to make one up.
Oh, just in your head?
Yeah.
Dividing by negative.
This, now you have to factor the negative.
A -1. No, well, just divide everything. You can still just divide.
Factor -1.
No.
Just divide.
Why don't you factor? Because then you have to multiply everything by negative, dog.
That's what you do.
No,
All right.
it's dividing it.
We're dividing by -1.
It disappears when you do to the zero.
Okay. Divide everything by -1. The number in front of x squared must be +1. So then this becomes x squared minus 3x minus 5 equals 0. Move the constant to the other side. Blank space, 5. Okay, take the b term, divide it by 2. So -3 divided by 2 is just -3 over 2 squared gives you 9 over 4.
Wait. X minus 3.
Everybody good? I took the b term, I divided it by 2, and I squared it. Well, actually, it's negative, so really it's,
Times 1/2.
yes.
-3/4.
What? No. No, it's -3. Not -3 over 2. -3 over 2 is what you got after you.
Negative, not a number, dog. Look at the other one. It's a 9x squared. This is just a negative x squared. You don't even do it.
Alright.
Oh.
Divide the middle term by 2.
Right.
And then square it. So 3 divided by 2 can't be, so it has to fraction, right?
Yeah.
Times 1/2.
No, we already did that. We already times it by 1/2 because it was divided by 2.
So we just square it.
Yes. Okay. So then that's what's going to go here, plus 9 over 4, plus -3 over 2. Now, factor. Common denominator here is going to be 4.
Not the answer.
Okay.
It's 3 over 2 plus or minus.
So this will become 20 over 4. So this becomes 29 over 4. Square root it.
29 over 2.
And then move it over. And you're done.
Alright.
All right, now here's the imaginary one. Now, this is not on the test. However, in case you see it on the PSAT or if you see it on an SAT, now, I don't know. I don't know what the PSAT, they change it. All right, now. Okay, so if the instructions say find the real solutions, then the problem that I'm about to do, if it says find the real solutions, and if you get a negative number under the square root, you'll say no solution. But if the instructions say find all the solutions, then we would get an imaginary number. So for example, if I give you negative x squared plus x minus 1 equals 0, divide everything by negative 1, and you get x squared minus x plus 1 equals 0. Move the 1, x squared minus x blank space, negative 1 blank space. Take the b term, this negative 1 here, divide it by 2, and square it, and you get 1/4. So plus 1/4.
Minus 1 over 2 squared.
So x minus 1 over 2 squared, negative 1 plus 1/4 is negative 3/4. Soon as you do the square root method and you try to square root a negative number, you can't do it. No, because the 1/4 is positive.
Negative 1/4 plus 1/4.
No, you have to make it
Oh,
three.
negative 1, right. Negative 4 over 4 plus the 1 over 4. That's negative 3 over 4. That's not so fine.
All right, everybody good? So then this comes out. Now, if it said find only real solutions, you would stop at that step and say no solution. But on Friday, we're going to learn how to do imaginary numbers, so you would be able to solve this. So this is why we're not going to test you on something like this, because we haven't taught you imaginary yet. But if this were an SAT and it said find real solutions, the answer to this is no solution. But if it says find all solutions, then the correct answer, we're going to do plus and minus I square root 3 over 2. And then we add the 1/2. And x equals 1/2 plus or minus I square root 3 over 2. When you square root a negative number, an I comes out of the radical. But you don't need to know how to do this. This is what we're going to learn on Friday, how to square root negative numbers. So if you recall from your middle school days, if they ever ask you to find, say, the square root of negative 25, you were able to put no solution because you didn't know how to do it. But what we're going to learn on Friday, that this is going to give you 5i. So your homework's on WebAssign. Tomorrow and Wednesday we will review. Yes.
So on one of the homework problems, this one, so I made it, I added this, I added the negative 3, so and then I made it 9x squared minus 18x plus 3 equals 0, and then divided by 9. So I got x squared minus 2x plus 1/3.
Well, you could have left it like this and then just divided everything.